Ramos. I'm going to stand right here because I'm going to stand right here. Anyways, so I am a Mexican-American neuroscience PhD student at Brandeis University. I feel very fortunate to be there because Brandeis' neuroscience graduate program is among the highest ranking in the nation. But I wasn't always so fortunate. And today I'm going to talk about the journey that has brought me here. And I want to start by asking, how many of you are seniors or juniors? Raise your hand. So a lot of upperclassmen, right? And graduation isn't too far away, right? And it's an exciting time, but it's also a time of uncertainty, right? It can be really intimidating, and I've been in those shoes. I know what that feels like, especially if you're interested in science. Some of you may have already been exposed to the misconception that becoming a scientist is impossibly difficult. I like to call it the science is hard gossip. You'll hear people tell you things like that's just too much information to memorize. Or they might ask you, are you even good at math? You might find yourself thinking that it's something you can never learn. Or maybe you don't do so well in your high school science classes and you get to college and think that a science major is not an option. My hope today is that my story will help dispel some of these misconceptions and give all of you some insight on what a path into science can look like. And then at the end, I'll briefly talk about some of the work that I'm doing now at Brandeis University. So we're going to backtrack a little. I was born and raised in Laredo, Texas. By the time I was 14 years old, I had been in and out of juvenile detention 3 times. I had been expelled from the entire public school district, and a lot of people had given up on me. I was an underachieving student when I got expelled, and many of my teachers would have told you that I was a lost cause. At the time, my parents were the only advocates I had left, but I was too young and I was too stubborn to realize it. There was a period in which I didn't attend school, but eventually I was enrolled into a private high school, and it was the only school in the entire city that would take me. It was either that or military school. During my time at Power Christian Academy, my high school, I took creationism biology, I dropped physics, and I dropped chemistry because they were too intimidating for me. I wasn't ready to take those classes. And as graduation approached, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had a strong feeling that I didn't want to go to college. I signed up for the SAT and I took it. I scored below average. As a matter of fact, I scored 100 points lower than the average here at Waltham High. I started my undergraduate studies taking developmental math. That's a math class for students considered to have math skills below the standard college level. But while I was taking that math class, I was also taking a sociology class. And that's where the gears began to turn. It was a really challenging class, but it became interesting. I started to pay attention, and I started to think that maybe higher education could be the right thing for me. The midterm exam for that class came around, and everyone failed it. The professor was in shock because he had to give a retest. And this was the only time in my entire 5.5 years as an undergraduate that a professor gave a retest. But it was a second chance that I needed, and I didn't know it, but my life was about to change. I decided that I was going to pass the test, that I was going to put in the work. So I began to read, and I began to study. I developed little techniques like color-coded highlighting, yellow for key terms, orange for concepts, blue for important people, and pink for stuff that I thought was cool. Right? The exam came around, and I passed it with the highest grade in the class. And it felt good. I realized that I was learning really interesting things. So I set a goal. I said, I'm gonna finish with the highest final grade in the class. And this mentality felt awesome. It started to spill into my other classes. It was the middle of the semester, and I was behind, but I got organized. And I began studying day in and day out. And then I did it. I finished sociology with the highest grade in the class out of 100 and something students. I went to go speak to the professor after grades were out, and he asked me, Raul, what are you majoring in? What are you going to study? And at the time I was undeclared. I didn't know. It's my first semester. So I told him, I'm not sure yet. And he said, any field would be lucky to have you. And that was the first time that a teacher, that a mentor, a scientist believed in me. His name was Dr. Marcus Inalves, and I'll never forget that conversation with him. Class with him was that first spark, but then it became up to me to fan those flames. I began to take my education a lot more seriously, but I still had no idea what I wanted to study. I would end up changing my major several times. Every day, I woke up wanting to be something different. But then I began to do something that's gonna be critical in all of your all's lives for helping define it. I began to volunteer and to take on internships. I started volunteering for professors at the university, and at first, it was doing really simple things, like inputting numbers onto a computer. Just crunching numbers from surveys that they would hand out to other students. I would sit there listening to music, inputting that data. But as time went on, I became increasingly involved in projects, and I didn't even realize it happening because I was enjoying what I was doing. I was focused on the journey and not at all on the destination. I had forgotten that I wasn't good at math. I had forgotten how terribly I did in school before college. I had stopped thinking of a science career as something that was unattainable. Eventually, I applied to an REU at Brandeis University. That stands for Research Experience for Undergraduates. They paid for me to fly from Texas to Brandeis and to spend the duration of the summer doing research. It was during that summer that I was placed in a neuroscience lab, and I had finally found where I fit. I realized that I was passionate about the work and that I enjoyed it. And not only that, till this day, it doesn't feel like work to me. And it's because of these experiences in life that I'm now a scientist at Brandeis that gets to study how our brain and the cells in our brain change in order to enable us to learn and maintain stable learning over time. And the type of learning that I study is something that you all might have first-hand experience with. How many of you have ever been food poisoned? Come on, you eat something, it's gross, it gets you sick, and you don't forget what made you sick, right? And the idea of consuming whatever made you sick again is 100% off-putting, right? And so this phenomenon, this type of learning, is called conditioned taste aversion, and we can replicate it in the lab. If we take something like a taste it, let's say sugar water, and we give it to a rat, and the rat has a positive experience, this is a happy rat, then the next time it encounters that taste it, it's gonna really like it. But if we take a similar scenario and we have a rat that instead experiences stomach sickness, then the next time it encounters that taste it, it's gonna want nothing to do with it. And this is conditioned taste aversion. And thanks to the work of many great scientists, we now know that this type of learning takes place in an area of the brain known as taste cortex. So what we have here, it's a little dark, but we have a slice of rat brain. The brain cells are labeled in blue, and in green, we have taste cortex. And we now know that information about taste and information about stomach sickness come together in taste cortex, and that's where this connection is made and this type of learning takes place. Now, I'm studying how the single neurons, the single brain cells in taste cortex, and we have an image of them here, how these neurons change at the cellular level to allow for this learning to happen. And what are some of the properties of these cells that enable this type of, it's a very unique type of learning. And so if you take anything from this talk, I want to say that if you've ever dismissed the idea of a career in science, I want to invite you to think again. Because you don't have to be the next Einstein that walks the earth. I'm not. All you have to do is be curious and be interested and find something that you want to learn more about. And I want to leave you with 2 pieces of information to hopefully pique your interest. The first is that science careers are considered some of the low stress, high pay careers. But not only that, out of all the things you could study a PhD in, and this is not including medical school, and this is not including a master's degree, but out of all the fields you can study for your PhD, 18 out of the top 20 highest paying are science careers. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions from you. Feel free to ask me about anything.
Which facility are you in at Brandeis?
Facility?
Yeah, like which lab?
I'm part of the Turigiano lab. So Gina Turigiano, it's in one of the science centers there. So we have several science buildings at Brandeis. So in her lab, we study how experience-dependent changes in the brain. So you have to, when you experience things, our brain changes in response to that, and that's how we learn. And her lab studies how those brain cells change in order to accommodate this learning. But not only that, if you think about it, your brain is always changing. How does that maintain stable over time? How do we not lose information? How are we able to keep it together, for lack of a better word? And so that's a very interesting problem right now in neuroscience, is the fact that our brain is so dynamic and yet it's so reliable.
What were some of the other majors that you were involved in?
Yeah, so I started off undeclared, and then I went into psychology, and then I realized that I didn't want to do psychology, and so I did biology, and then while I was doing biology, I fell in love with chemistry. Remember, I didn't do chemistry in high school. I actually dropped it the first time again in college because I had a professor who wasn't doing a good job of explaining the material. And eventually, maybe my 3rd time trying to get into chemistry, it was with a really good professor, and I actually fell in love with it and started taking a bunch of chemistry classes. And so I ended up graduating with a psychology major, with a biology minor, but I had more bio classes and more chemistry classes than I needed for anything. So it was almost like I was triple majoring. But what I was actually doing was I was just taking classes that I was interested in. Whatever sounded like something I liked, I wasn't worried about what degree I was going to get. I was just more interested in learning things that I wanted to learn about. And that happened to translate into neuroscience because it's a very special field of science that combines psychology and biology and chemistry, physics, computer science. It's awesome. It's awesome. There's a place for everybody in neuroscience.
I'm really interested in your creationism biology class in high school. What topics did you guys cover? Do you remember?
It's a little fuzzy, but
Can you talk about evolution at all?
I think that we might have, like, the book that we had might have touched based on it and been like, yeah, that's one theory, but like alternatively, there's this. Although I will say that my high school science teacher, she had gotten her master's in biology, and although she was religious, science and religion can coexist, and so she was able to kind of bring elements of both into the class, and it was actually a class that I enjoyed a lot. So yeah, I don't remember exactly all the things that we might have covered, but I know that I came into college with a very weak STEM background, and absolutely no idea. And the only reason I took that sociology class was because it was required of me. If not, I wouldn't have taken it.
How much math do you do day to day?
So I've recently been doing a lot of programming on MATLAB. I don't know if some of you are familiar with it. It's simple algebra, simple arithmetic, but I ended up getting all the way as an undergrad. I ended up taking calculus and passing it with an A because of YouTube. YouTube is an awesome resource, by the way. Whenever you need a quick tutor, YouTube. And so I will say that I have rounded out my math skills, but I do wish that I would have had a stronger opportunity to experience that when I was younger, because I felt like I played catch up for a lot of my life.
What's the most interesting part of your class?
So I love like everything about it, because I think it's pretty cool. If you think about it, I kind of feel like I never grew up. I just start now. When I was young, I like to, like all of us, I like to play with toys and stuff like that. Now I feel like I'm getting paid to play with adult toys. Like I can walk into work and I have access to lasers, $12,000 microscopes. I get to image brains. That brain slice and those individual cells are all pictures I took, and I took them for fun. I didn't even have to do it. Like, it's pretty awesome. Like I don't feel like I'm working. I interact with other people who share this interest every day, and it's just such an awesome environment to be in. Because growing up through college, when I did become interested in science, I had no science friends. None of my friends were interested in science. And it's okay, they were pursuing other careers of their own, but I never knew what it would be like to be around people who were interested in the same stuff. And it's pretty cool. It's just like, hey, we got a new laser, you want to go try it out?
What do you not know?
It can be competitive, and that's scary. But at the same time, for me, competition really pushes me to like work hard.
If you were to choose a different position, what would you choose?
Computer science. I think coding is awesome. I didn't know how to code at all until last semester. I decided that it was time that I learned, and that things are heading into a direction where coding and the ability to code is very important. And so I took a class, and now I'm very comfortable in it. Classes will be important no matter how old you get. I'm someone that really benefits from that environment. So I'm not much of a I'm not much of a self-learner sometimes. I really benefit from like instruction, and so I learned to code. And if I could go back, I would do computer science.
So once you finish, your program, are you looking to do more research or like a job?
I'm interested, although it's still open, I'm interested in something called science consulting. And I'm really interested in pursuing that, but I haven't really got enough firsthand experience with it, so that could change.
When was CTA confirmed to occur in gustatory cortex?
I don't know exactly when it was figured out that it happens in gustatory cortex. You look familiar. Were you at Brandeis?
I was working in one of the labs last summer.
Were you in Sasha's lab?
Yeah.
Yeah, right next door. So I don't know when it was confirmed that it happens in gustatory cortex, but the phenomenon itself was discovered in the 60s by someone doing completely different research. So the picture I showed of this man, John Garcia, he's really inspirational. If you look up his obituary, it like really hit home. But he was working on radiation research, and he noticed that rats would not drink water from the water bottles in their radiation testing chambers, and they were plastic water bottles, and the ones that they had in their cage were glass. And he hypothesized that maybe the plastic was giving it a taste that they could recognize, and that, coupled with the sickness, was making them avoid that specific water. And so he tested it by adding flavor to the water, so that way he could be sure that the rats could recognize it, and controlling for the bottles. And he was doing something completely different, but he noticed something so simple that no one had ever noticed before. And he went on to testify before Congress about the dangers of radiation in a time where the government was very pro-nuclear, and we still didn't know a lot about this. And so I think it's really amazing. It shows that all you have to do is just be curious, right? And you never know what you're going to stumble upon.
Did you ever get a chance to go back to all those teachers that like gave up on you and like
I will say that I've like Googled the school and maybe like, you know, I will say that sometimes I do think like, ha, like, I did it. Like, you know, if I think back, I can think, all right, do y'all have to go?
They do.
All right.
Do you want to? Oh, you guys, this is where we're on the